Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. This is the basic part 2 to sort of my JavaScript in 30 minutes. So we did, in the first 30 minutes, we kind of covered everything up to functions. In this 30 minutes, we're going to be focusing mainly on collections, how you can collect multiple pieces of data in one variable. And there are sort of four main ways to do that in JavaScript. Two of them is what you'll use 90% of the time. The other two are kind of there. You can use them if you want. But the first one is an array. An array is an ordered list of items. So basically, it would be something like this. So if I were to say const, so we make a variable, my array, and we use square brackets. So we use square brackets to define an array. So if we like 1, it's the first number in the array, comma, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 5 numbers in my array. Cool. Okay, now let's just show that my array equals all those numbers. Console.log my array. And there you go. So we have an array with 5 elements in it. But what if I only want to get to the first element? Well, that first element's accessed by putting in square brackets after the name of the array and putting in an index. An index just says, okay, which spot in the array do we want to access? The first spot is always 0. So if I put 0 there, that's going to access the first spot in the array. And then I just do this. There you go. And if I just keep doing that, 2. So 2 would technically be the third spot because it's 0, 1, 2. So let's hit save, and so that should get me 3. Cool. Arrays also have a property that's very useful called length. This just allows you to know what the length of the array is. So if I do my array.length and console log that, that should tell me that the array has 5 elements inside of it. Cool. Okay, so there's a length of the array. Now that's super useful when it comes to iterating or looping over the array. Okay, so let's say I want to loop over the array and print all 5 numbers individually. I could use that for loop we learned about in the previous video and say x equals 0. Long as x is less than my array.length, so as long as it's less than the length of the array, then keep looping. Because again, the array has 5 spots, but the highest index is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And at the end of each loop, we'll just add 1 to add 1 to x. And then every time this loops, we'll just console.log my array, but not just any element, the element at the x index. So again, x is changing. X is originally 0, but then it's 1, then it's 2, then it's 3, then it's 4. So it'll print out each individual item in the index. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice. Okay, so you can iterate over an array. So that's all very useful. And again, it doesn't have to all be numbers in an array. I could throw in a string in the middle of the array. Okay? And that's fine. Okay, I can put another array in the array. I can put whatever I want. Okay? So now if I were to console log the array, cool. Okay. Now notice when I put the array inside the array, it literally is an array inside the array. So how would I get to like that 2? Okay, if I want that 2 number there, first I have to get to the element where there's the array. So it'd be 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's at the third index. So at the third index we have an array. And then that array has an index 0, 1. So then I put another square bracket and I'd access the element in that array. And that should get me that 2. Cool. Okay, we can see it got me the 2. Cool. So that's an array. One other thing to kind of notice, let's say we had 2 arrays. So I say, well, Control Z, we'll just say const my R1 equals 1 and 2, and const my R2 equals 3, and 4. Now let's say I want to combine these two. Const my R3 equals a new array that's a mix of my R1 and my R2. Watch what happens when I console log my R3. See, now I have an array with 2 arrays inside of it. That's not exactly what I wanted. I really just want one array that says 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the way you do that is you use what's called the spread operator. What it does, it just flattens the array by one level. Doot. And there's just 3 dots before the name of the variable. So 3 dots, it just spreads out the array. So that way, instead of it putting in the array of 1 and 2, it just puts in the value of 1 and 2. So now, see, now I combine the arrays into one. Okay, so those are just some of the low-hanging fruit as far as how you can work with arrays. Actually, one more thing, something called array destructuring. So we now know that my R3 is going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. But what if I wanted to separate those out into their own variables? I could do this. Const 1 equals my R3 0. Const 2 equals my R3 1. And I could do that. It would take a while. So watch if I do that. Console.log 1, 2. That'll just be the variable 1 and 2. See, 1 and 2, but that's a lot of typing. That's 2 full lines. What if I could just do it all in one line? This is what's referred to as destructuring. So I'll declare a variable, but then I use square brackets. The idea is that this tells JavaScript that the variables I'm going to put in these square brackets, they're used to tear apart the array on the other side. And then what happens is that the first item in the array will go into the first variable I declare in this fake array. So essentially the numbers are, so in our array we're going to have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm just going to create variables named 1, 2, and 3, and 4. I don't have to call it that, but why not? 1, 2, 3, 4. And that equals my R3. So what it does, it takes a look inside this array, which is this, takes the first item 1, puts it in the variable 1. It just does it in the order that they're stated. 2, 3, 4. So now if I console.log 1, 2, 3, 4, and it works. Very nice. Okay, so that's called destructuring. Okay, so that's what that's referred to. So that's arrays in a nutshell, and how you can kind of play with the data in the arrays and whatnot. So again, an array is an ordered list of items. But what if you don't care about the order? You just need a bunch of different information, and instead of referring to it by an index number, you would like to refer to it by a name. That's when we use an object. So let's say const my object equals, and this time you use curly brackets to define the object. And what we do is we put keys in values. So I could do a key like this. I could say, hey, cheese is the key, meaning the label we'll use to refer to that variable. And then we put the value. So we'll put cheese. And then you put a comma, and you can say, hey, name, Alex Merced. Then comma, it doesn't have to be all strings. It could be a mix. So here we're going to have age. So my age is 34. Okay, and there's my object. So I can console log that object, console.log my object, save, and there you go. You can see there's the keys and values. Keys and values. What if I only wanted to print out one value? I could just use dot notation. So it'd be my object dot name. Okay, and so that'll just print out the name. Okay, cool. I could also do it like kind of like an array, where an array uses the square brackets. I could use the square brackets here and instead just put the name of the key as a string inside the square brackets. So I just put name. That's the same thing as what I did before with the dot notation. Alex Merced. I could actually even use that kind of notation to define my variables inside here. So I could be like this. Name. Okay. I think I do name equals. No, not in there. Yeah, still just do the semicolon. Cool. And then I save. And see, still cheese, name, and age. Okay, so there's two ways you can kind of label your keys. The benefit of this is you can actually use like other variables, so you can have dynamic names if you don't know what the names are going to be ahead of time. So that's pretty nice. Cool. And anything else I want to say about that? Oh, and you can also even use functions. You can put functions in arrays or objects. So I can say, hey, say hi. And then just slap an arrow function in there as the value. Console log. Hello. Okay. So if I can just sit there and be like, my object dot say hi, and then invoke the function. And there we go. Save. And then do this. There you go. See, it says hello. We console log the phone. So here we had a console log of the object. That's line 10. And then here we have the running of the function, say hi. Cool. Now, kind of back to what we were talking about before with the spread of combining objects. Let's say I have two objects. So const my obj1 equals name Alex, and then const my obj2 equals age 34. And just like before, I want to turn them into one object, so const my object3. So I create a new object, and I say, okay, this object's going to equal my obj1 and my obj2, thinking that's just going to mix them together. Okay, now if I console log my object, let's see what it looks like. Where did I make a mistake? Oh yeah, it's not called my object anymore. It's my obj3. Save. Okay. But you see, now it's just one object with two little objects inside of it, under the key of my obj1 and my obj2. That's not what I wanted. I really just wanted one object with name and age. So once again, the spread operator comes to help me. So if I do that, now I can combine these two objects. Easy peasy. Name, age, 34. Isn't that neat? Okay. And kind of last time we talked about destructuring, where you could use the array and kind of pull out the stuff from the array. Again, kind of like I was mentioning before, I could just individually assign these to arrays. So I could be like const name equals my obj3 dot name, const age equals my obj3 dot age, and then if I console log both of them, name, age, now they're separated, but that's 3 lines. What if I could just do it all in one? So what you can do is kind of like before, except instead of using square brackets, you'll use curly brackets. That says that you're destructuring an object. And I'm going to say name age equals my obj3. And the way object destruction works is that it's going to look at this name, this symbol, this variable name, and look inside my object to see if there's a key with that name inside of it. So if it finds an item also matching a name, it'll assign it to this variable. Same thing with age. So it'll look inside my object. Is there an age property? Yes. So we'll take that value and assign it to this variable. So see, I did the same thing, just in one line, and now when I console log name and age, I still have them as separate variables. So that's pretty useful. There's a lot more to destructuring. I do have like a destructuring masterclass video where I spend a half hour talking about all the different cool stuff you can do with destructuring. So do check that out. Okay, so that's an object, so you can store all sorts of information in objects and pass them around and do all sorts of fun stuff. The last couple ones I'm going to talk about are quick ones. Now, the first one is a set. Okay, and the set really, the only real purpose of a set is to remove duplicates from an array. So let's say I have an array. Const my array equals 1, 1, 2, 2, 2. So I have a lot of duplicates in this array. What I can do is I can say const my set equals new set, and then I pass in my array into the constructor, and this is going to create a new set. And just so you can see what it looks like, console.log my set, save. Okay, so now if we console log my set, okay, and you see here, it looks like the array, but it's not, and we removed all the duplicates. The only problem with a set is that I can't do all the stuff I can do with an array. We don't know this yet, but there's a bunch of functions and cool stuff you can do with an array. Check out my array masterclass video. So this would be really useful if I could turn this back into an array. So we can do that. So let's add another line. Const my r2. And then what you do is you just do this. You create a new array, and inside of it, we'll just use the spread operator with my set. So that way you just expand the values into the new array, and then we'll console log my r2. And there you go. Now you turned it back into array. So you can use sets as an intermediary that just remove duplicates out of something, which is really, really nice. Makes life really, really easy. Okie dokie. And then let's take a look at maps. Maps are the last of the sort of 4 ways you can kind of have bundles of information stored in JavaScript. Okay, so then what we do is we'll say, well, I should have kept the array. So my array. Actually, no. We're just going to create a new map. My map equals a new map. And a map is kind of like an object where there's keys and values, but it stores it in an array-like structure. Which the only benefit is you can use something called a for of loop, which we haven't talked about yet. But a for of loop could be used over a map. It cannot be used over an object. Instead, objects have something called a for in loop, which works a little bit differently. The reason being is that arrays, sets, and maps are in a category of what's called iterables. So all this information inside of them is in a certain order. So when you use a for of loop, it's going to loop over that data in that order. While objects do not have a particular order, their keys, depending on which browser you're using, will show up possibly in a different order, even though I think nowadays it's mostly fairly uniform. So in that case, when you use a for in loop, the order that's going to loop over the values in the array could be different depending on, in the object could be different depending on what you're using. So the bottom line is, you got to be careful what kind of loops you're using, and the fact that the difference between a map and an object is maps are iterable, objects are not. Cool. So I have a new map, Okay, now let's actually add some values to my map. So here's a little bit more complicated to add a key. You have to be like my map.set, and then you pass in a key. So we'll say name, then you pass in a value, Alex Merced. And then we'll do another key, my map.set, age 34. Okay, and then let's console log my map. And there you go. See, there's my map. Now, if I want to get a particular value for my map, I would do my map, and then I have to use this get function, and I would go get. Let's say, and then in the parentheses, I'll type in the key. So we'll say age. And it'll get me the age, which is 34. Cool. So otherwise, it kind of works like the same. 90% of the time, you'll probably prefer to use the object. Again, only if you really need to use a for of loop over it, or yeah, that'd probably be the main reason you'd want to use a map over a an object, but it's an option. So just so you're aware of it. So again, 90% of the time you're going to be using objects and arrays. So getting really good with objects and arrays is probably more important than spending a lot of time with sets and maps, but it doesn't hurt to be aware that they exist. Last thing I want to go over in this video is classes. Classes are a way to sort of create a template for how to set up an object. Okay? So imagine that like you're going to create the same object over and over again. It'd be really annoying to sit there and just create the same object over and over again. So what you can do is you create a class. So a class works like this. You'll say class, we're going to say dog, so we're going to create a dog class. Okay, and then we generally get what's called a constructor function. It's a function that builds the thing. So kind of like you notice with map and set, you have to do like new map, new set. It's because those are technically classes. You're invoking their constructor to build them. So you can create your own custom types. So new constructor, and then we put in whatever parameters. So we're going to say every dog has a name. And then in the constructor function, this which always happens when you create a new dog, we're going to say, hey, this dog's name, so this always represents the individual dog we're making. This dog's name equals the name that we pass into the constructor. Okay, safe. And now I don't need to ever type all that up again. So if I need a new dog named Sparky, const Sparky equals a new dog name Sparky. And we'll say const spot equals a new dog name Spot. And if I were the console.log Sparky and Spot, okay, see I have a dog named Sparky and a dog named Spot. So I can define whatever I want in here if there's just some sort of object that I'm going to be using a lot. This is like, particularly for like video games, you see this a lot because you might have a villain and there might be lots of villains, and there's a lot of things about villains that are the same and you don't need to define them over and over again. And you can define functions. So, you know, bark. And we'll just say, and here you don't use a function keyword, you don't use arrow functions, you just kind of do it like that. And we'll just say console.log bark. So now every individual dog can bark. So Sparky can bark now. Spot can bark now. Because all you're doing is you're predefining what the object they create looks like. So I'm creating an object. It's an object that I can access all of its properties just like an object earlier in the video. But now I don't have to actually individually add bark, individually add name every single time. This constructor function builds it out for me. And I end up with the resulting dog that I can now use over and over again. There's a lot more to classes, but this is the basic idea. So now if I save this, and I do this, and you can see Sparky and Spot barked. Cool. So in 2 videos, we did a pretty good overview of all the main features in JavaScript and some of the advanced little tricks. Now it's on you to go learn more. I do have other videos that go deeper into all these areas. Just look up the masterclass videos: array masterclass, object masterclass, destructuring masterclass, class masterclass. There's all sorts of really good stuff out there, but this gives you a pretty good review or a pretty good introduction to JavaScript. So I'll see you guys later on.